it's you again. Welcome back. What? Is something on my face? Oh, hi. I'm Marc. I've been a professional artist for years, and now I teach art for a living. In this week's YouTube Art School episode, we'll look at 5 illegal anatomy mistakes I see students make all the time. Of course, the whole point of this class will be to show you how to not make the same mistakes and drastically improve your character anatomy as a result. We better get this class started. All right, class is in session. Pay attention. Drawing anatomy is hard. Whether it's getting the right proportions, drawing the muscles properly, just generally speaking, making sure that your characters actually look like actual humans and not some deformed aliens, there are many ways to mess it up. As a teacher, I see the mistakes I'll highlight in today's class all the time. The good news is that they're fairly easy mistakes to avoid once you're aware that you're making them. We'll look at 5 of the biggest mistakes. All right, time to gain those easy art XP points. The most likely mistake to ruin your character's anatomy will almost always be related to proportions. You can have the best line quality, accurate placement of the muscles, it still won't matter if the proportions are a hot mess. And they're so very often off, especially when your character is in any kind of pose that's not just standing straight. Looking at this, at first glance, it might seem like everything is fine, but you'd be wrong. The upper arm is too short, the knees are too high, the left arm is too short. Usually though, the culprits are the limbs. So let's take a look at some basic proportion relationships you should keep in mind next time you draw a character. Let's start with the knees. They're almost always going to be right below the halfway point of the leg if we measure from the crotch to the heel, not any higher or lower. The femur, the bone of the upper leg, is the longest bone in the body. This means the lower legs are shorter than that. That makes sense. The lower leg is shorter than the upper leg. The exact same can be said for the arms. The upper arms are always longer than the forearms. Another reference point that's very useful in maintaining good proportions is the length of the arms compared to the torso. Your arms without the hands attached. Kinda creepy, I guess, but they should always perfectly line up with the crotch. Did you know? Keep those guidelines in mind if you're struggling with proportions. It'll make a big difference. The second illegal mistake is placing the breasts of your female or male characters too dang high. For some reason, they're rarely too low, but it's so common for the breasts to be drawn almost touching the character's chin. Don't do that. Even if your argument is that they're implants, it's still wrong. The natural placement for breasts will usually be right on the lower line of the pectoralis major, the chest muscle. Let's see what that might look like. Here I got my rib cage, and in front of that, the sternum. That's usually also the full height of the chest muscle. I'll always recommend drawing that stuff before drawing breast because it's a great reference point. Once we have the pecs on here, well, the breast will be perfectly centered on that line, much lower than before. Now, maybe they're supported by a bra or something like that. In that case, they'd be higher, right? Sure, but not by that much. These here are supported, and they're just a little higher than before, still staying right around the line of the chest muscles. You gotta make sure there's enough room between the clavicles of your character and the start of the cleavage. Stop drawing breasts too high. I believe in you. I also believe you should check out the coupon in the video description for a huge discount on my complete art education program, celebrating reaching over 11,000 students. The reviews and the ratings speak for themselves. Learn more about the program with the link in the top right corner of the screen and down below. The coupon is valid until the end of the month only, so there's still some time, but I will be extending it into next month since a lot of you have asked. It'll just be for a slightly smaller discount, so don't miss out. Now, on to the third mistake, anatomy foreshortening mistakes. If you draw your characters in any kind of dynamic poses, chances are you'll have to worry about foreshortening. Perspective of the different body parts. We were just talking about breasts being too high. Is this one then just a mistake I made? No, this is foreshortening. We're looking at the character from a lower point of view, therefore the breasts only appear higher. If we were looking right into her eyes at eye level, they would appear much lower on the torso. Also here we can't even see the clavicles of the character, and it basically looked like the neck is attached to her left breast. What's going on? Perspective is hard. Things often go wrong when it's involved, and it's usually because the character wasn't constructed. Constructed? What, bro? Constructing a character is drawing an initial sketch of the pose using only simple geometric shapes. No detail. The logic is that there's too much information. Too many details in a character like this to expect drawing it accurately in perspective with proper anatomy. If we start with the basic volumes in perspective though, that's much easier. Almost anyone can learn to draw this relatively quickly. Once the pose is constructed with these simple shapes, then it's a lot easier to slap on the anatomy details on top. By breaking the process into steps, we're able to focus on each one at a time. Makes it a lot easier. And that process should be the same regardless if you use references or not. Avoid easy foreshortening mistakes by constructing your characters first before going into details. Do it now. The fourth mistake, and we're almost done. And if you've made it this far, I'm proud of you. You're taking your art seriously, and I love you more than whoever moved on to some other useless video. It's the difference between winners and losers. You're a winner. As a reward, you can go ahead and download one of my 2 main brush bags for free with the link in the video description. I also made a Clip Studio Paint version of my legendary line art brush that I use for all of these drawings here. And well, now it feels just like it does in Photoshop. I'll put a link to that in the description too if you want it. Go grab it. Now, as I was saying, the fourth mistake is about dislocated limbs. Ooh, gross. I see this mistake so often. It's almost one I expect to see my students make. This will be a problem specifically when your characters are dressed up or partially cropped out of the canvas. This example might seem fine at first glance, but the arm doesn't connect with the shoulder. Oh, if I draw it out and try to connect it, it becomes obvious. It's not working, but this stuff is often not so obvious unless you draw your characters naked first. What? No, that's the trick. When there's armor or clothes covering parts of the anatomy, it's easy to lose track of the proportions or the proper shapes of the muscles. It's harder to measure things visually. When you draw the character naked first, it gives you a solid foundation to build on top of it. Same idea when drawing close-ups. This might even be harder to measure properly without drawing the whole body. That arm might seem fine, but once again, it doesn't connect properly. I think I could probably get away with that one, but often you'll know something is not right, yet you won't be able to figure out why unless you draw the rest of the body. I know it's more work to draw that stuff, but it's not going to be visible in the end, so you can be pretty sketchy with it. This is why all these characters are naked too. I practice what I preach. Naked first, then we dress them up. And then finally, the last mistake of this video is going to be dedicated to bad hands and feet. Hands and feet. The artist's mortal enemies, but they don't have to be. I get it, drawing hands is hard. They're each basically full characters on their own, like small bodies with 5 limbs. The thing is though, you don't need to be able to draw hands in every possible angle. I always recommend learning just a handful of hand poses. You don't need to worry about all this stuff, that's too much work. Think of the typical poses your characters will be in and just learn to draw like 3 to 4 hand poses really well that you could reuse like 80% of the time. And that's it. Maybe a hand holding something. It could be like a sword, a drink, an arm, whatever. Another pose could be a closed fist if you're drawing a lot of superhero types of characters seen from the front view. Maybe another more relaxed one again for character drawings that are seen from the front. Just like you don't need to learn the entire dictionary to write a book. Learn just enough to get by. Most of the time. This way, when you do draw hands, your options will be limited, but they'll look great. They won't ruin your character. That's good. Once you get good at those few hand poses, well, learn a few more. I even made brushes when I was a concept artist for poses that I draw my characters in often. Big brain stuff. Those common ones are the best to learn to draw from memory. And that's gonna be it for this week's class. Hope that was helpful. You better not be making these mistakes anymore. You have no excuse. Also, now would be a good time to pay the class fee of either 1 like or 1 sub. I need it to feed my family. Do it now. And make sure that you click on the bell to get notified when next week's class drops. You must not be Is something on my face?